our living room, the room where we spend so much of our time. This is the one room we have in the house where our family can just sort of exist. Upstairs, there's the bedrooms, the bathroom, the kitchen, the dining room, and the living room. So when we moved in, I painted this brick around this corner fireplace from the 60s white, and it has served us well for the past 3.5 years. But the time finally came for me to enlist some help from my brother-in-law to make this dream of a stone fireplace come to life. So if you've been on our channel for a while, you know that our house was built in the very early 1900s, but an addition was put on in the 60s. So through this process of renovating the farmhouse, I've been trying to marry the old with the new. And this new fireplace from the 60s needed to be taken back a bit. It needed to be dirtied up, more rustic, something more earthy that would tie into the shiplap and the old floors and the quirkiness of the old part of the house. So part of that involves putting new wood flooring down. And by new, I mean, of course, old wood. And that is to come this fall after the wood seasons to our environment. But before we put the flooring down, a big important step was to redo this fireplace. Now, there was nothing wrong with the brick. Everyone who visited liked it. But to me, it just really needed to be a little crustier, a little bit more rustic. And the way that I incorporate those elements through the farmhouse is through old wood and crusty antiques and stone. So Jeremy came and he spent a few days helping us to build a stone, not even really a facade because it's straight up stone. It's just stone from our local area that we got from a local rock supplier. We were able to just gather it from around the property of, a piece from this garden, a piece from that garden. And then we took an old board from the old part of the house that we took out when we redid our window and made it bigger. There was this big, large header that was put in the old part. We grabbed it and we converted it into a mantle. And I love how this project turned out. We can do a lot in our day making new things look old. And I'm all for that when it really works. But there's also something to be said for actually just making something that's old. And I love that this mantle was created from an old part of the house because that's exactly what we're trying to do, is marry these two pieces of a conjoined house. And this wood piece is probably 20 years old. So it really adds some serious history and character to this fireplace. So after the stone was in place, all I had to do was go over the brick with a plaster, a joint compound. And that just kind of broke up those brick lines a little bit. I wanted it to look like old crusty plaster that had, 100 layers of paint smeared on over the years. And that's exactly what it ended up looking like. So it kind of broke up those straight lines, made it a little bit dirtier, a little bit more vintage feeling. After the first layer of joint compound dried, I went ahead and smeared on a second just to give it a little bit of a smoother texture. Naturally, as joint compound settles, if you layer it on thick, it'll crack. And that's a good look, especially with what we're going for. But I wanted something a little bit smoother than that. So another layer after it was all dry, and then of course letting that dry before we finally painted with a beautiful shade of cream. And I'm telling you, if there was a cream that was exactly the color of Cece's milk. This would be it. It's called Simply White. I got it at Lowe's, and it's fabulous. So my next task is to paint the entire living room in this beautiful white before we put those floors down so I don't dribble paint on it, which I inevitably would. So please ignore the unfinished trim and the weird paint lines. That will surely come in time as we begin to sort of perk this space up. I love how far it's come in our years here on the farm, and I love where it's going. What amazed me about this fireplace project is how inexpensive it was. Because the rock was just collected from around the property, we had some leftover flagstone from a previous project. So it took, Stu, 4 or 5 bags of mortar? Concrete? Not much at all. A little bit of paint, an $11 box of joint compound. Amazingly cost effective for such a transformation.